There is a genre of horror manga that I've been struggling to think of a good name to describe. I eventually settled on the term cute trap, which my wife informs me might not be the best name. Essentially, these are horror in disguise stories, luring unsuspecting readers in with the promise of a cutesy, wholesome slice of life or adventure story with big-eyed moe-ish characters drawn fairly young, bright colours and the like. However, before you know it, the story springs its trap and you realise that you're actually in horror territory. The best general example I can think of is Doki Doki Literature Club and probably stuff like Higurashi. Today's subject of discussion may just be the purest archetype of this genre that I've encountered in ages. I came into this one expecting an adventure story with maybe a slightly melancholy feel and perhaps a bit more gore than you'd expect in something that looks like, well, like this. Oh man, this manga. I mean, where do you even start to excavate the nightmare that is Made in Abyss? Well, I guess you start at the beginning. Kanagawa-born Akihito Tsukushi, who previously worked at Konami, doing visual design work for pretty obscure JRPGs, eventually left and decided to follow his dream of being a mangaka. After a few experiments, he started to publish Made in Abyss in 2012. Despite its interesting world, Norman Rockwell-inspired gorgeous watercolor art, and truly brilliant premise, the series was initially not very well received, generating lukewarm interest and faced cancellation after only a handful of volumes, probably due to its excessive world building and slow-ass start. However, thanks to advice from his team and publisher, Tsukushi introduced a new character and, well, dialed up the nastier aspects of this story to 11. You'll see what I mean. A few years later, Made in Abyss had become one of the biggest breakout success stories within the modern seinen genre, with solid sales, a massively popular anime adaptation, and even a pretty interesting looking upcoming game. And no wonder, Made in Abyss is one of the most creative, best drawn, and incredibly original manga that I've read in ages. It's exciting, beautiful, touching, and engaging. It's also quite possibly the most disturbing thing that I've encountered within recent memory. Forget gory, this is straight up harrowing at times, combining what feels like a setup for an old school fairy tale with Miyazakian fantasy and then injecting it with a hefty dose of Lovecraftian horror and... Hang on, did you hear something? Yeah, there it is again. Hanayo, is that you? Oh, I see. It appears that there's an elephant in the room. Okay, fine. To preempt what are almost certainly going to be wonderful, very measured and constructive discussions in the comments, I guess that I have to address said elephant. There is a certain art style quite common to the cute trap genre, where characters are drawn a certain deliberately innocent way to heighten the impact of what happens to them. And at even the most charitable take, Made in Abyss features characters that are drawn young. Made in Abyss also happens to feature a fair amount of nudity, and you see where I'm going with this. Now, whether you take the hardline stance that this is completely inappropriate and probably at least tangentially connected to a certain word starting with L, or whether you believe that the author did this deliberately to enhance the vulnerability and innocence of these characters before throwing them into the metaphorical buzzsaw, it certainly generated a lot of controversy, particularly with Western audiences. As for my take on it, well, in these trying times, I sometimes like to refer to a higher power, so why don't we ask Jesus for guidance? Jesus?
My son?
Yes?
I'm not touching that with a 60-foot pole. Next caller.
Yeah, that's about where I stand too. Naturally, I won't be showing any of this stuff in the video, and if you think it's going to bother you, I'd recommend you just watch the anime. It's really good, doesn't dial back much of the other horrific content, and it's quite a bit more restrained when it comes to the nudity. Okay? Okay, with that out of the way, brace yourselves, because it's time to begin our journey deep into the radiant darkness of Maiden Abyss. Our story opens in Orth, a sort of steampunkish fantasy city built next to the Abyss, a massive chasm stretching down to unknown depths, and yeah, the art in this manga is frankly some of the best I've ever seen, especially if you like that sort of sketchy watercolor style. To me it looks like a children's bedtime story, and this suits its dark fairy tale vibe perfectly. Now, I will warn you right off the bat that the story does start a little slow and remains like that for a good while. I can see why this struggled to find an audience initially despite the gob-smacking art. Anyway, we meet our protagonist Riko, a tomboyish girl fascinated to the point of obsession by the Abyss and in possession of something she calls the Star Compass, a relic which nobody seems quite sure the purpose of. We get to know a little bit about the world as we go. Yeah, keep in mind that a lot of this manga initially is world building, and it's one hell of a world. Orth sprung up next to the Abyss after its discovery, and some strange force prevents observation from above, meaning that to access the Abyss, it falls to so-called cave raiders, who must physically make their way in and down, usually in search of strange artifacts and relics worth a lot of money. The Abyss, however, is home to biomes and creatures of its own, not all of them friendly. Riko, as she's absolutely obsessed with the Abyss, spends time visiting her aunt, who's married to a famous cave raider, who, like Riko, aspires to become a white whistle, cave raiders being ranked according to the whistle color, with red being the trainee rank, restricted to only part of the first layer, 450 meters deep, while the top-ranked white whistles have no depth restriction at all. As more info is doled out, we learn a bit about the curse of the Abyss. It works a bit like the bends. You won't feel anything as you get deeper, but as you start to move upwards, you'll suffer serious mental and physical distress. The deeper you go, the more you suffer. We'll learn more about this later. Much more. Riko belongs to an orphanage for the offspring of dead cave raiders, training up to become cave raiders themselves. It turns out that Riko's obsession with the Abyss is driven by her mother, a former white whistle who went down deep and never came back. She begs her teacher to allow her to go deeper, and he promises that if she can bring back the best relics of the group on their next visit, he'll consider it for next time. Before we join Riko in her first descent, there are a lot of little explanatory asides between chapters, giving us even more world building. Tsukushi, man, your imagination is quite something. Riko and her friend and fellow red whistle Nat begin descending to the upper parts of the first layer and immediately remark that it's quiet, too quiet. They split up and begin excavating, and Riko finds a few relics and a skeleton which startles her. Oh, Riko, if only you knew what was in store for you. She begins packing up her loot, but finds that it's a bit heavy for her, so she heads off to find Nat to help, and spots him about to be eaten by a crimson splitjaw, a huge serpentine creature from the lower layers. It immediately notices her and belts her one with its tail, knocking her flying, but before it can chow down on her... Turns out Nat is okay, but Riko has no idea what toasted the snake, and she sets off, following the trail of destruction. On the way, she finds a funky necklace, which she pockets, and eventually the giant flaming holes lead her back to something that looks like an unconscious boy with a smoking aperture in one of his hands. Yep, that looks like a robot or a cyborg or something. She takes him back up to Orth. Our next segment begins with Riko and the other kids trying to get Roboy online again and eventually discover that electricity does the trick, which unfortunately trips the power all through Orth, prompting the other kids to run away and her teacher to come and investigate. He's pissed but doesn't guess what's going on yet, and we also learn that Roboy has an extendo arm. Cool. We spend a bit of time with the robot. Turns out he has no memories and doesn't even know what he is. More confusing, he has a navel and needs to eat. Next up, we get a nifty little interlude, giving us some more info on the Abyss and its curse. Level 1 gives you the Lurgy, Level 2 gives you the Superlurgy, Level 3 messes up your balance and gives you hallucinations, Level 4 inflicts excruciating pain and makes you bleed from every orifice, Level 5 turns all of your senses off, Level 6 mutates you somehow, and Level 7, well, you just slowly melt. Rico wonders if Roboy would be immune to the curse and if he's maybe an invader or an emissary from the mysterious lower layers. We also learn a little bit more about the relics, which seem to be frankly magical in nature, including a bell that stops time. Rico thinks that Roboy might be an Owlbard, one of these legendary class relics, and realizes that if this were found out, she'd be in the deep crap. She and the other kids decide to have him pose as another orphan. Yeah, we're doing this thing now, but it doesn't last very long. Rico names him Reg, which was the name of her dog. That's actually pretty damn cute. Two months later, we joined Rico and Reg watching Hubble, that famous raider from earlier, returning to the surface, bearing a white whistle, which Rico immediately realizes belonged to her mother, Liza the Annihilator. That's quite a name. We also learn more about the whistle ranks, going from apprentice at red, proficient at blue, expert at black, teachers at moon, okay, and finally the top rank, white. Hubble gifts Rico with her mother's whistle. Turns out that there's something special about the white whistles specifically, as their whistles are actually relics of some kind and can only be used by their original owner. Rico was also left a sealed envelope. We learn a little bit more about Rico. She has bad eyesight requiring special glasses, but as it turns out, it's a bit more complicated than that. Liza, her mother, actually gave birth to her while deep within the Abyss. Her father, Torka, was killed in a battle with raiders from other countries, but Liza was able to place Rico within a special container that repels the curse and brought her back to the surface. Rico was finally given permission to read the letter, and on the way in, spots a whole bunch of other maps and documents from her mother, including what looks like a diagram of Reg. At last, she finds the letter, which reads, "At the Netherworld's bottom, I'll be waiting." And I'm sure those of you that have read this or watched the anime are thinking, don't go Rico, just leave this alone. But of course she doesn't. Instead, she makes plans to head down into the Abyss on her own, to find or at least learn the truth about her mother. Reg decides that he wants to go along too, because he wants to figure out, well, what he is. The other kids are a lot smarter and warn the pair that this is a suicide run. The Abyss is basically a world unto itself, and the completely uncharted bottom is estimated to be about 20,000 meters down. The first layer, the edge of the Abyss, is where most of the raiders spend their time. The second layer, the Forest of Temptation, is far, far more dangerous, filled with monsters and difficult terrain, and things only get worse the further you go down. In fact, red whistles going down past the first layer are considered suicides. Rico? Listen to this kid. But naturally, Rico is a crazy little idiot and says, bugger it, she's going. They decide that her first goal should be the Seeker Camp at the lowest point of the second layer bordering the third, and to then ask the people that live there if they have any more information on her mother. Saying their goodbyes, Rico and Reg soon find themselves at the gondola and prepare to head down into the darkness. As Volume 2 begins, we join Rico and Reg down in the Abyss's first layer. He's used his extendo arm to set up a sort of protective cat's cradle around them to protect them from potential creatures while they sleep. They've made it nearly a kilometer down, about 2/3 of the way to the second layer. And that art, man, what can I even say? Believe it or not, it gets even better as the series goes on, and somehow that's not always a good thing. The pair eats breakfast, and it turns out that Riko has a knack for cooking food that looks horrible but tastes amazing. She shows him the star compass, but loses her grip, and the relic falls down a nearby waterfall into the abyss. To console her, Reg shows her that he has her mother's letter and her other writings on the abyss, which were given to him by the teacher, who also included a warning saying that he'd be on his way down to bring them back. Dude, please get a wiggle on and save these two kids before... Yeah, I know. It's just that rereading this is really hard, knowing what's coming. As they hurry down, they're also attacked by a mantis-like creature called a silkfang, but are able to escape it fairly easily, and soon find themselves staring down into the second layer. They spot a light high above them, and realize that it must be their teacher, who then leaps down at them, but it turns out that it's actually Hubble, who is impressed with their spelunking thus far. He's come to see them off, bringing them food and medicine to help with the curse on the second layer. He also says that he has his own business below, so he won't be able to accompany them, and warns them that the Seeker Camp is home to a white whistle, Ozen the Immovable. Apparently, she helped Liza to save Riko back in the day, but Hubble tells them to be very careful of her. She's pretty damn dangerous. They part ways, with Hubble looking on in concern despite his encouraging words. Down in the second layer, the reality of what they've done begins to sink in, as they realize that the second layer is indeed a lot more dangerous, filled with pretty vicious creatures. Making their way through a dense forest of giant leaves, they hear someone calling for help and find a raider being nommed on by some kind of Lovecraftian abomination called a corpse weaver. And bleh, it turns out that it's the creature making the noises like those damn vines from the ruins. That's really creepy. Too late, Riko remembers that weepers come in flocks, pushing Reg aside as another one grabs her. Reg tries his extendo arm, but narrowly misses and is attacked by more weavers, causing him to fire off his awesome Dragon Ball Z beam, which, holy shit, that's cool. He's finally able to save Riko, but she's lost her notebook. As we move into the next arc, and yes, this is where the manga starts to pull back the mask, we get a small map showing us the second layer in more detail, and then rejoin our duo as they make their way towards the Seeker Camp. There would usually be a gondola, but it wasn't lowered. Reg fires his arms up, but someone grabs them and pulls him in. It's this freaky owl lady. Yep, that's Ozen. Turns out she's a bit of a bitch, telling Riko that she didn't want to bother saving her at all. She does give the two a battlefield promotion to Blue Whistle, somewhat impressed that they've made it thus far. Ozen's apprentice Marulk is instructed to find out what's going on with the two, and takes them on a tour of the camp and shows them to their quarters. They're already becoming firm friends. We also get our first legitimately scary scene, well, second if you count those frigging corpse weepers, as Riko recounts what she did the previous night as she looked for the crapper. After losing her way, she began hearing strange noises and eventually ran into... What is that? A headless torso crawling around? Ugh! The next day, Ozen confronts Riko and tells her that going further down is pointless, as her mother is dead. The fact that her whistle was sent to the surface confirms it. Ozen was, in fact, the one that sent Liza's stuff back up, after she found her grave in a field of flowers on the fourth layer. But Riko is resolute. Ozen then takes her to see a relic that apparently saved her life, revealing that it isn't quite how it was described. The cube isn't just a curse blocker, it's a resurrection machine. Put something dead into it and it comes back to life. C. Recall was a stillbirth, and that horrible thing from last night, Ozen popped it into the cube to see what would happen and... Cheese and rice! When did this manga suddenly start to scare the crap out of me? Anyway, Reg intervenes, interrupting the spooky fun times, but somehow Ozen is easily able to hold him back. We get a bit of a flashback to Riko and her friends talking about the White Whistles, who apparently have superpowers, okay? Liza the Annihilator, Srajor the Mysterious, Bondrud the Novel, yeah, remember that name, and Ozen the Immovable. Each of the sovereigns, as they're called, are armed with special, ultra-powerful and mysterious relics, and they serve not only to explore the deepest reaches of the abyss, but also as a trump card if Orth is ever attacked. Ozen basically toys with Reg before telling him that he needs to be destroyed before he regains his memory. Reg attempts to wrap her up in his arms, but she easily shrugs him off and sends one back at him at high speed. He's able to dodge, but she then slams him into the ground before smashing him literally into the floor. Riko tries to intervene, but Ozen knocks her flying with a flick, injuring her quite badly and prompting Reg to try and break free of her. Knowing that they're outmatched, Reg prepares to fire his incinerator at Ozen, but she points his arm at Riko and he's only just able to twist it away. Going on the attack, he lands a solid blow, knocking Ozen's robe aside and revealing that she had hundreds of little relics embedded in her body, which she tells him are called Thousand-Man Wedges. She then dons her Big Daddy armor, damn it but that's an awesome design, and when Riko wakes up, Ozen has seemingly killed Reg and tells Riko that the two of them aren't cut out for raiding. Well, duh, they're like, what, 8? Later, Reg wakes up. Turns out that Maruk went to get Ozen's men to stop her, but as you probably guessed, the entire thing was just a test. Yep, we're doing this thing now. The reason for this are the monsters in the lower layers, which Ozen claims are even more powerful than she is. Oh yeah, and the whole thing about Riko's mother being dead, just Ozen being a shitheel. Oh Ozen, we're actually going to be missing you soon. We get a brief flashback. Ozen is actually very old, and her weird posture is a result of the abyss gradually twisting her mind and body. She was, in fact, Liza's teacher, and, you know, I can't put my finger on it, but I really like this panel. The contrasting styles and emotions sort of summarize what lies ahead. As Volume 2 draws to a close, we learn that Liza left Riko because she wanted Riko to find her own way. What? And because Liza wanted to see what lay at the bottom of the abyss. Wonderful parenting there, Liza. Volume 3 opens with Ozen training up Riko and Reg for their journey below. She takes the pair out to a secret part of the second layer and tells them that the first part of their training is to survive here for 10 days on their own. They actually do pretty well, but Ozen and her crew, watching them through a telescope, are a bit apprehensive. Riko has the spirit, but she's too weak and young to do what she wants, and Reg, while powerful, is indecisive. They will need to depend on each other to survive. After Riko and Reg make it back, Ozen explains a bit more about the deeper layers that lie ahead. She tells them that the further down they go, the weirder and more difficult it's going to get, and that in the lower layers, even time passes differently. She also gives them a dire warning. Once they reach the 5th level, beware not to linger, and to be careful not to run into other White Whistles, who apparently are pretty damn dangerous even compared to Ozen. She takes particular care to warn them about one in particular, Bondrud the Novel, who she describes as a scoundrel. Yeah. Scoundrel is maybe not the correct word. Listen to this lady, Rico. That dude is bad news. Ozen finally gifts them with Blaze Reap, Liza's old weapon. Basically an exploding pickaxe that only has a few strikes left in it. They share a tearful goodbye with Marulk, and I'm guessing Marulk has read a bit further than this because that would be about my reaction too. Good luck, both of you. You're going to need it. Rico and Reg gradually make their way down the Great Fault, an enormous vertical cliffside, by navigating the tunnels crisscrossing the walls, when they're attacked by the Splitjaw that they thought they'd killed way back when. Reg prepares to fire his incinerator again, but remembers what Ozen told him. Firing it exhausts him, and he'll faint shortly after using it, after which he remains unconscious for around 2 hours. Working together, they manage to punt the snake down to the vault, where it's eaten by the flying monsters that fill the air. Bit by bit, they gradually descend further down the cliffs, and enter the 4th layer, the Goblet of Giants, a humid, watery biome filled with enormous plants. As they explore, they find a weird-looking squid creature swimming through the water, and Reg tells Rico that they're being followed by something ominous, as it emerges from behind them. That's a pretty creepy-looking critter called an orb piercer, one of the most dangerous creatures known to raiders, covered with vicious, amazingly poisonous spines capable of piercing steel. They attempt to escape, but the thing seems to have impossibly good reactions, cutting them off and slashing open their backpack with its spines. Realizing they can't get away, Rico tells Reg that the orb piercers avoid creatures bigger than them, and he tries to scare it off with Rico's umbrella, which completely fails, leading to the umbrella being destroyed and Rico getting a poisonous spine through the hand. I'm just going to say it right now. This right here is where the manga begins to take a turn to the nasty, and it doesn't ever really let up. You've been warned. With no way to escape or attack, Reg realizes that their only option is to go back up, but this will bring on the effects of the curse, causing Rico to hemorrhage violently. Rico tells him to do it, which he does, and sure enough the curse kicks in, causing Rico to trip balls and... yeah, consider that a warning shot. Rico's in serious trouble, bleeding profusely from every orifice and the poison causing her hand to swell to enormous size. She's in excruciating pain. Reg can't remove her glove, so Rico begs him to no. Oh please no, we're not actually... okay, I guess we are, as Reg smashes the bones in Rico's wrist and begins to hack off her hand with a knife. Sweet Jiminy Christmas, that's horrible, but it appears to be pointless as Rico is now completely unresponsive. Before this fucking harrowing little 127 hours moment can reach its conclusion, Reg is interrupted by this Miyazakian monstrosity, only under the outfit is an odd rabbit-like creature who agrees to help. Reg gives Rico mouth-to-mouth, and the newcomer takes them to its little dungball house tucked away in the recesses of the 4th layer, which actually makes that last little bit even worse somehow, because not only was it entirely pointless, but Reg has probably done lasting damage to Rico by smashing and mostly severing her arm. And that's going to be it for today. Next time, we'll get to the stuff that I'm sure you're all waiting for. Yeah, I'm sure you people who have read or watched this already are salivating in expectation for the really nasty stuff. But you'll have to wait until next time for that. If you enjoyed this video and want to help out, maybe consider leaving me a sub. Otherwise, that's me for the day. Cheers, take care, and I'll see you in maybe a week. This is the Owl, signing off.